France's political turmoil deepens. President Emmanuel Macron's fifth prime minister in less than 2 years quits after just 27 days, his government lasting just 14 hours. The left and right want elections and for Macron to stand down. So, what's next for France? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. So, France is in deep political paralysis. A deadlocked parliament and the latest prime minister gone after less than a month, his cabinet not even lasting a day. Intense pressure on President Emmanuel Macron. Demands for him to quit now, even coming from former allies. Snap elections he called last year are at the centre of the current crisis. Intended to head off resurgent far-right, his plan backfired. The National Rally, led by Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen, won more seats with the centre squeezed. On the left, too, rare unity emerged, forming a new bloc to take on the resurgent right. At the heart of the crisis, too, is the country's rampant public debt, now costing $78 billion a year to service, more than most ministries. No government means no budget, and on the chaos goes. So what is the way out of this, and can France motor on regardless, or is crunch point approaching? And what next for President Macron? We'll get to our guests in just a moment, but first, this report from Alexandra Bias.
A shocking collapse. The French Prime Minister resigning just 14 hours after unveiling his new government, and less than a month on the job. The shortest-serving government in the history of the Republic.
Les conditions n'étaient plus remplies.
The conditions were no longer in place for me to carry out the duties of Prime Minister and allow the government to appear before the National Assembly.
Sebastien Lecornu had just named his new cabinet, but it was fiercely criticized across the board for being largely the same as the previous one. Resigning, Lecornu said the lack of any consensus meant decision-making would be impossible. France is facing a political deadlock unseen in 60 years. After French President Emmanuel Macron's decision to call a snap election in June last year, the National Assembly's been divided into 3 blocs: the far right, center right, and left wing. 3 prime ministers have since come and gone, and pressure is mounting on Macron, with the country's budget and public debt at the center of the crisis. Pressure to call elections too, from both left and right. Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally is calling for elections. Its bloc, with its allies, has the most seats in parliament and is ahead in opinion polls.
It must stop. We must return to the polls. Let the French decide. This is what we think.
France's hard left leader has gone even further.
Within the institutional framework we have, what can we do? There is one path: the impeachment of the president.
But after the succession of prime ministers and governments over the last year and a half, many in France are fed up with politics and politicians.
It's been a circus for several months, but now we have reached a new level. I find it a lack of respect for people who are interested in politics, for people who expect solutions from it. There are many French people who are in need, who are expecting things, or who expect things from the people who govern them. And here we are, at zero, below zero perhaps.
France used to be one of the strongest economies in the European Union, but its debt has reached a record $4 trillion, the highest in the Eurozone, and 114% of its GDP. Parliament can't agree on a budget that addresses that debt, which could become a wider issue of concern for the Eurozone. Macron's given Lecornu another chance, 48 hours to name a new government. If he fails, the president says he'll take responsibility, but what that means remains unclear. Alexandra Bias, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Helpful at this point, I think, to take a quick look at the French political system. France has a semi-presidential system of government with power shared between the president and the prime minister. The president handles foreign policy and defence, and the prime minister oversees domestic affairs. Every 5 years, the president is elected by popular vote, The president appoints a prime minister who then recommends the cabinet ministers to form a government. To stay in power, the government must have the support of the majority of the French Parliament, the National Assembly, which is elected in separate parliamentary elections. If the National Assembly loses confidence in the government, it can dismiss the Prime Minister and Cabinet. The President, in turn, has the power to dissolve the National Assembly. All right, so that's a picture. Let's bring in our guests. They're all joining us from France. In Strasbourg, Thierry, Mariani, a member of the European Parliament for the far-right National Rally Party. In Paris, we welcome Eleonore Caroit, a member of Macron's centrist Renaissance Party. She's also a deputy of the French National Assembly. And in Marquillies, Eric Bocquet, mayor of Marquillies and a member of the French Communist Party. A warm welcome to all of you. Important topic to talk about. And let me start with the words of the veteran political commentator Nicolas Bevray. He said, he wrote, "At this critical moment when the very sovereignty and freedom of France and Europe are at stake, France finds itself paralysed by chaos, impotence and debt." Eleonore Caroit, you're an MP with President Macron's Renaissance Party. This is the France that President Macron presides over. And that analysis is spot on, isn't it?
Many of our constituents, he shares a sentiment of preoccupation, and it is true that the situation is worrisome because it is unlike anything we have seen in the Fifth Republic. We have an extremely divided parliament, which is the result of the snap elections that took place only a year ago, as you were reminding in your story earlier. And there seems to be no solution, or at least no easy solution to this crisis with the appointment of a prime minister and the building of a coalition. Now, I wouldn't be this negative because when you see France's role in the international scene, and I was at the UN with President Macron only a few weeks ago, you see that France's voice is very strong. It recognized Palestine. It also took a very strong stand at the 80th anniversary of the UNGA. And I can name the Coalition of the Willings with regards to Ukraine. So I think at the international level, what the president is doing is seen and perceived, but we need to solve the internal political crisis. And as you rightly said, we have two heads of the executive here in France. We have the president, which, as you said, is mainly in charge of the stability of institutions and also of the international affairs. But we also need to find a government that looks like the National Assembly. So I hear many people in the opposition saying we need other elections, we need to go back and do it again. I'm afraid doing it again would actually lead to the same result. And what we need to do is what other parliamentarian regimes do, is finding a way to build a coalition.
Let me just jump in there very quickly, Eleonore, because it's not France's international reputation that's at stake here, is it? It is in many ways, but from what you're talking about, this is not the point of this discussion, is it? It's what's happening domestically, what's happening to the government domestically, and what the people think about it, and how it's going to get out of this mess.
No, absolutely. But I think it is important to remind this duality of the executive in France and to say, well, the mess needs to be solved at government level. And so government level means actually finding a way to appoint a government which will be accepted by the National Assembly, or else they will just simply censor it as they've done for the past 3 prime ministers. Now, what may seem as a major crisis for a regime that was mainly presidential and mainly based on a very strong executive is something that is the daily bread of our European neighbors, and is something that can be solved with willingness and the desire to sit at a table and to find solutions. I think it's taking a bit of time because, to be honest, parties here in France are not used to that. They're used to either being in a clear majority or a clear opposition. And right now, this is not what we have. We have, as you rightly said, a tripartition. But I do not think that we are not able to do what other countries can do. So I believe there's been a move in what the oppositions do and think, and that we will eventually get there. At least this is my desire and what I'm working towards.
Okay, let's bring in Thierry Mariani from the National Rally, who's speaking to us from Strasbourg. What do you make of what you've just heard and the situation within the country?
Well, what is the situation of this country? Emmanuel Macron was elected in 2017. That means he's president since 8 years. What is the situation? We are the number 1 for the debt. You tell it now, it's 3,400 billions of euro of debts. And the situation is politically blocked because after the snap election last year, in the National Assembly, you have 11 groups. 11 groups. Honestly, I never saw that in the parliament. I was elected in 1993. At this period, there was 4 or 5 groups. 11 groups, and there is no majority. In fact, all the groups are divided in 3 blocks. One block who support the government and the president, one block who is the left, who is against the government, one bloc who is the right and is against the government. And as you told, we have 4 prime ministers last year. There is no majority. And there is, in my opinion, no solution. And if you want to know more, the French are fed up about that situation. That's why Marine Le Pen just asked something. Return to the vote. Return to make a snap election.
We'll discuss that in a second. We'll discuss that in a moment or two. But Thierry, just another question to you. What about the view that all parties, in fact, are culpable here, particularly in your case, the National Rally Party, because as Lecornu said himself, that everybody's acting up as if they have a majority and creating this pile-up?
No, I repeat, nobody has the majority. And if you ask what is the position of my party, it's very clear. We must have a new election. Or if he wants, he can resign. Because, be clear, even if it is a parliamentary regime, the problem in France now, it's not the parliament, it's the president. And if you speak with the French, they want to have a new election about it.
All right, Eric, let's come on to you, member of the Communist Party France. Your party is part of the coalition on the left. Is there not a need, really, in this case, for the disparate parties to come together for the national cause, to get this budget through? Because this, as we've already heard, is an existential crisis for the Fifth Republic.
Well, as Mr. Mariani said, there are 3 blocks at the National Assembly. And they're not 3 blocks because they want to be separated. We have fundamentally different programs, different choices. And I think today, President Macron is paying the bill. He's nearing the end of his term. He's paying the bill of his management of the French Republic since he was elected back in 2017. Limiting the taxes on the wealthiest people, limiting the taxes on the dividends for shareholders. And today we have 10 million people in France living below the poverty line. People cannot stand this anymore. The inequalities are exploding in this society. Society is split into 2 or 3 groups. Nobody can support this anymore. So there is a need for radical change in the political choices and the economic choices that have been made so far. It's time to appoint somebody from the left parties in the National Assembly, because Emmanuel Macron, after the snap election of last year, neglected the result. He refused, he denied the result, and he chose to make another choice on other sides of the assembly. It's now, maybe there is a chance to get out of this chaos by appointing someone from the left-wing parties in the National Assembly.
OK, Eleanor, what do you think of that? Because there is one last chance for Sebastien Lecornu, isn't there? One that he probably didn't necessarily ask for, but he has to try again by Wednesday evening to get a government together. Might he succeed at this late hour to do so? And may he look to the left to achieve that?
Yeah, well, he said clearly that he's not willing to stay in the role of prime minister because he does not have a majority. And I think that was pretty honest and very dignifying of him to react this way. It really shows that he's not trying to keep the power no matter what, but he's trying to find a solution for a country. I personally am not opposed to having a prime minister that comes from the left. But what you have to understand, and everyone seems to agree on this, is that there's no majority. So it cannot be a program that is only a program from the left. It must be a program, and we're talking actually about a budget, because this is what we need to do urgently at the National Assembly. This budget needs to show the compromise and needs to show the divisions in perception and in solutions that come from the National Assembly that we have today. So of course I agree with that, and I agree with any solution that would allow our country to have a budget by the end of the year. Now, calling for new elections with no guarantees that the result would be any different from what we had only a year ago ago would actually delay this process that we need to move forward to, and adopting a budget. And in any event, in less than 2 years, you have presidential elections that are scheduled. And I think it is very important to respect our institutions and not to have a president resign or a president be dismissed only because you have a political crisis. I think this is why we have, again, two really important figures at the head of our executive force. And this is something that I am really attached to. And I think it actually ensures their stability and ensures that we can still have a voice at the international level, which is something that is of the utmost importance when you look at what is happening right now in Ukraine, in Europe, actually. And at the same time, have the government respond to the parliament and actually reflect the forces that are right now represented in the parliament.
Thierry, you're calling for snap elections, and I guess you would think that your party would be set to do better in another election than last time round. But actually, there's no guarantee that things would improve in a snap election.
Well, that's true that there is no guarantee that's a bloc win. But excuse me, we have a guarantee that everything is blocking now. And the only chance is to try a new election. That's why we ask a snap election. We will see, but excuse me, after that, if there is still a blocking situation, the institution, of course, is very clear. Mr. Macron is elected until 2027. But excuse me, there is a spirit of institution. I remember a president who was General de Gaulle. He has no majority. He resigned. He can stay 4 years more, but he decided to resign. Now there is a crisis. Who is the responsible? The only responsible is Mr. Macron. He tried to govern alone. Even his former prime minister, who is in own majority, Mr. Attal, tell it yesterday. He said, we don't understand anymore the president. The former prime minister of Mr. Macron, the mayor of Le Havre, said exactly the same thing. We don't have any solution. That's mean what we can do. I heard what said Eleonore, but excuse me, we don't elected the president to take care about Ukraine or the rest of the world. We elected the president to take care about France. And it's too much easy to say, oh, the president is elected and he works in international. And in France is the mess. We have so many debt. We have low salary, as my colleague said. We need to change policy. For that, we need a new election or a new president.
OK, well, let's get on to the concept of a presidential step-aside, if we can put it that way, because, Eric, it's an interesting question whether or not Macron should go down the route of that nuclear option and step down, leading to further presidential elections. I mean, he's losing support of two of his former prime ministers who are distancing themselves. Gabriel Attal, he was speaking on Monday night, and he struck the first blow, saying, like many French people, I no longer understand the president's decisions. He's getting more and more isolated, isn't he?
Yeah, completely. But he's been isolated since the beginning. He's sitting at the top of his pyramid. He has never listened to anybody, never listened to the people demonstrating, never listened to the trade unions demonstrating in the streets. If you remember 2018, at the end of 2018, November, December, the movement initiated by what we call the Yellow Vests, who expressed their difficulties in living in this country. They wanted better wages, better pensions to meet both ends meet at the end of the month. And there was no real concrete answer to these demands by the people. So he neglected all this. So he's paying the bill today. He's paying the bill of not solving the problems. The French people asked for solutions. And there was also this, he imposed this new pension scheme reform a few years ago, which was never accepted by the people, but he imposed it through Parliament with an article of the Constitution that avoids having a vote within the Assembly. So people are still refusing this reform. So there was a series of mistakes all the way since he was elected. And today, I think he's paying the bill about all this.
Indeed. Eleonore, can the country continue to function in this state? Can President Macron preside as he's still doing, as he insisted he is going to do until the end of his term in 2027, with any stature, with any sense of backing from the people, given this mess?
Trying to minimize the complex situation we're in or to deny it. What I'm saying is, I believe in our institution, and I believe that keeping the terms and respecting them, it's something that is of the utmost importance, because if you don't do that, you're going to set a precedent that will actually weaken basically any force of the executive power. But on the contrary, what I'm saying is we have a situation that is the result of the massive vote of French people in the snap elections that took place a year ago. And this is something that we have to respect. They voted freely and they decided to give a very divided National Assembly. Do I like it? No. Do I think it's easy? No. But do I believe that because there is a problem, then I'm going to jump into a solution that is in no way a guarantee that it will solve the problem? The only way to solve this problem, and I am the only person here that is at the National Assembly and can tell you the discussions we're having right now, is to find a way to agree on our disagreements and on a basis to have a budget by the end of the year. And this is something feasible in other European countries that have this tradition of parliamentarian discussion, and there is absolutely no way, I'm going to tell you, that French MPs are not capable of doing what other MPs know how to do. And Mr. Mariani at the European Parliament knows that this is also possible at the European Parliament. So why wouldn't we be capable of doing so? I just refuse to, say there's no other solution. It actually depends on us, and it's something that we're trying to work on, and it didn't work for the past 3 prime ministers, but it's a fairly common situation in parliamentarian regimes, actually, to have a succession of governments that do not stand until you have a strong base. And we're building that.
Okay, Thierry, do you want to come back on that?
No, I think, of course, I agree with Eleonore, but excuse me, it's not possible in this moment. It's not possible. Why? Because first, nobody trusts in the president. Excuse me. Each time when there was a snap election, they said, I understand the voice of the people. But in fact, he shows the government all the time in the same team. Look, for example, the former prime minister, who was just during 14 hours, in fact, was minister of Mr. Macron since the beginning. And the French has the same, has the impression that it's the same film all the time. There is a new name for prime minister, but in fact, it's nearly the same program and it's nearly the same team. That's why I think Mr. Attal, who I repeat, was the prime minister of Mr. Macron, said he understands nobody. He is elated. And of course, if it is possible, everybody in ideal world, want to make a common program. But excuse me, we are not agree about many things. For example, the left want more salary, more. The right want less immigration. Your government was something else. Honestly, tell me which is the common program for everybody. You are looking for it since 2 years and nobody find it.
Okay, Eric, the nation needs a budget. Nothing happens if there's no resolution to this. But this push for President Macron to stand down at this point of crisis for the nation, doesn't it come at the expense of France itself, or would you two like him to step down?
Well, I'm not sure this would be the right solution. I think the urgent solution is to give back more powers to the parliament, which Mr. Macron has neglected so seriously since he was elected in 2017. So give the power back to parliamentarians, and we'll have a budget. Whatever happens, there will be a budget, even though this budget of this year will be renewed next year. There is no problem with that. We'll have a budget, whatever happens. But today, the emergency is to give back powers to parliamentarians, the MPs in the National Assembly.
Okay. Eleonore, I think you wanted to come in.
No, I fully agree with what Eric just said. It's a matter of giving back the power to the MPs. And what Thierry is saying basically is, well, he doesn't trust Macron. And granted, I understand why he doesn't trust Macron. He doesn't like Macron. And he's been trying to have him step down for a while now, at least his party has. So I understand where he comes from. But to me, the solution, the viable solution, if we want stability in the markets, investors to continue to invest in France, if we want to have a budget by the end of the year, is only coming from a compromise here at the National Assembly. And the one thing I want to add, a compromise does not mean that we're going to agree on everything. Of course, I'm not going to agree with the program presented by the left on so many points. But what I'm saying is, if you understand the urgency of adopting a budget by the end of the year, and if you understand that the calendar is actually very, there's a short amount of time before the next elections, general elections that will take place in the spring of 2027, then you can actually accept to have a budget adopt, agree on a few priorities, and then you'll have the big renewal or the big continuity, whatever it is, at the time when it's scheduled in our institutions, without brutalizing our country, without brutalizing our institutions, and without having to go through an electoral situation that would actually not be good for a country or for the stability.
We're coming towards the end of the show, so I'm just jumping in there. Thierry, as far as Europe's concerned, you're in Europe, you're at Strasbourg. How serious is this for Europe itself, given that France is a major engine in the European economy?
Yes, of course, it's a problem. We are the second economy of Europe. But I repeat, if everything is blocked, it's just because the situation of the parliament is mathematically impossible. My colleague said, the communist member said, we must give more power to the parliament. But excuse me, if we give more power in the parliament today, it will be the same, 3 blocks, no majority. That's why we repeat, to save the image of France, even in front Europe, because I agree with you, the part of French economy is very important in European economy. We need very quick, stable situation. And the only way is to return in front the voters.
Eric, we've had a certain amount of agreement between the three of you. Not much, but there has been a certain amount. So if you guys can do it, why is it that the politicians can't?
Well, there are basic and fundamental differences between the 3 blocks, obviously. They're not 10 systems, there are 2. Either we serve the interests of the financial markets and the wealthiest people in this country, or we take into account the needs of the vast majority of the people who simply want to live better in this country, which is still the 7th economic power in the world, which is still a big country with very few rich people and more poor people. This cannot go on like this. These problems must be tackled by a government, a new government, on new basis.
Well, resign, call new elections, or appoint a prime minister from the outside his political camp. Which direction will President Macron take? We'll see in the coming day or two. But that's all we've got time for. Thanks to all our guests, Thierry, Mariani, Eleonore Caroit and Eric Bocquet. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again at any time by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Nick Clark, and the entire team here in Doha, it's goodbye for now.